Hey guys, BlueOJ Leader here. So for the 80th anniversary of the Railway series, I took the opportunity to rewatch a couple of my favorite Thomas & Friends movies that I own on DVD. I own loose DVDs of all the movies from Magic Railroad to Blue Mountain Mystery. However, unfortunately, my Day of the Diesels DVD got a scratch on it, making it basically unwatchable. So because of that, I hadn't rewatched the movie in a long time. That was until very recently. I decided that it was finally time to rewatch this movie through definitely legal means and form a fresh opinion on it. But the thing is, after I rewatched Day of the Diesels, something interesting happened. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I realized that I had a lot to say about this movie and that I had to make a video talking about it. Why? Because Day of the Diesels is an extremely fascinating Thomas movie. And it's not simply because I think it's a bad Thomas movie, but because it was so close to being good in my eyes. Movies like Magic Railroad, Bwubba, and Misty Island each have fundamental flaws at their core that ultimately break them as films and make them bad in my eyes. However, Day of the Diesels isn't like that. There's an idea here and a story worth telling, but it is butchered to the point that I can only describe this movie as wrong. It just feels wrong. And in that way, it's unique to the other bad Thomas movies. There's a lot that I want to talk about, so we're just going to dive straight into this. Obviously, this is all just my opinion, you're free to disagree, blah blah blah, you all know the drill. So with that being said, let's just dive into this, shall we? Here is why Day of the Diesels feels wrong to me. Day of the Diesels was released on DVD in the US on September 6, 2011. Weirdly enough, it was released way after season 15 aired despite the fact that it takes place before that season. I don't know what happened here. That feels like a mistake. And then the same thing happened with Blue Mountain Mystery. What is this? Anyway, this 4-season period of seasons 13 through 16 is considered the nitrogen era of Thomas & Friends. And it is also considered one of its worst eras. Boring, samey episodes with stupid plots and absolutely nothing to say. At least it started and ended strongly, but man, everything else in the middle was really bad. Day of the Diesels was teased at the end of Misty Island Rescue, and I remember being very excited for it as a kid. I remember reading the Big Golden Book and seeing this image of Thomas being trapped in what looked like a burning building to me. It just looked so exciting, and there was no way that this movie would disappoint me. And when I got it on that DVD, it did not disappoint, and I loved it. But that was a long time ago, and now I have higher standards, and as you can probably tell, my opinions are very different now. And we're gonna talk about why. I don't know where else to put this, but I find the cover art of Day of the Diesels to be incredibly misleading. There's no fire engines, no Percy, Thomas is front and center despite being a side character. And why are Mavis and Salty with Diesel 10? They're barely in the movie. I love that because of these reasons, the Japanese cover felt the need to add more stuff to it. It's kind of funny. But okay, that's enough stalling. Now is as good a time as ever to finally dissect Day of the Diesels. Oh boy. It's probably been a while since you watched Day of the Diesels, so I'm going to do a summary of the film's plot. But to make sure that you all don't get bored, I'm going to throw in some of my compliments and criticisms throughout this section, so strap in, folks. So, the movie starts with Thomas and Percy helping to fight a fire. Things aren't going the best until Belle shows up. She uses the water cannons on her water tanks to shoot the fire and put it out. I would make fun of how silly her design is, but I won't because the fact that the water comes out of her tank, which now renders her unable to move, is even sillier. Why was she designed like that? And since she was, why didn't she bring a water tanker with her to prevent something like this from happening? Seems kinda like a dumb oversight. So Belle is now a Sodor resident and Thomas gets to show her around, yippee. This is when we get to one of the good parts about this movie. See, this movie isn't about Thomas, it's about Percy. Because Thomas is showing Belle and later Flynn around Sodor, he neglects his friendship with Percy, and Thomas seems pretty oblivious to this, and it makes Percy feel very sad and lonely. This is when the main plot gets going. So Diesel, through manipulation, tells Percy that he would make a very special visitor at the Diesel Works. Thomas tells Belle that Diesels can be devious and shouldn't be trusted. Pretty racist of him to say that, but I guess he was technically right. We'll pick this topic back up later. So Percy meets Diesel 10 and everyone at the Diesel Works. I like this interpretation of Diesel 10. It's fun. Anyway, the Diesels seem pretty friendly, and they talked about how they want a new Diesel Works. As you can see, the Diesel Works is pretty shabby, and Sir Topham Hatt doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. I don't blame the Diesels for being upset. And neither does Percy, so he decides he will ask Thomas to tell Sir Topham Hatt that they need a new Diesel Works. Why can't Percy just tell Sir Topham Hatt himself? I don't know. Anyway, the Diesels promise to deliver Flynn's hose for Percy, but they actually don't do this because they're evil and we need stakes for the climax. Percy helps in ways he can, like bringing Kevin to the Diesel Works, but nothing seems to work. Thomas won't listen and Kevin can't stay, so when Victor leaves the Steamworks to find Sir Topham Hatt, Diesel 10 says they will take over the Steamworks to make Sir Topham Hatt listen. Not a bad plan, honestly. But then the Diesels trap Thomas, and then Diesel 10 decides they won't give the Steamworks back. Honestly, what did he expect to happen? Percy was on his side. Sir Topham Hatt was going to show up anyway. Why did you betray Percy, making him go rally all the steam engines against you? You were going to get what you wanted anyway. Oh, that's right, they're the bad guys, and their plan from the beginning was always to manipulate Percy. And I guess we need more stuff for our climax, so yeah. Anyway, Thomas gets saved, Flynn gets his water hose back, and now he and Belle are able to put out the fire that started at the Diesel Works. Oh yeah, that happened, by the way. And then the steam team charges towards the Steamworks, there's a standoff, and then Sir Topham Hatt shows up, finally. Diesel 10 gets yelled at, and Percy and Thomas tell Topham about the Diesel Works. And then, he has the gall to say that he was always planning to fix the Diesel Works, and everyone needs to wait their turn. What? If that was the case, why didn't you tell the Diesels? And since you didn't, why didn't you take accountability for essentially forgetting about the Diesels all this time? Like, really, man? I know the Diesels are bad and stuff, but come on, take a little responsibility. So the Steamies and Diesels work together to rebuild the Diesel Works and everyone is happy. Yay, roll credits and play the solid Day of the Diesels song. And that's the movie. As you can tell, there are some things that I like about Day of the Diesels, but there are also way more things that I don't like. But right now, I'd like to focus on one of the worst parts about this movie. The lack of accountability showed throughout the story. Thomas is a terrible friend to Percy throughout the whole movie, and he doesn't apologize once for his behavior. This movie acts like Thomas never did or never would do anything wrong, and it annoys me. Like, bro, you clearly hurt Percy's feelings and you just acted very distant throughout the whole film. A simple I'm sorry could go a long way, but it never happens. And again, it annoys me. Almost as much as Sir Topham Hatt did when he didn't take accountability for ignoring the Diesels. Actually, now that I think about it, despite Percy sticking up for Diesel 10 even after everything he did, Diesel 10 doesn't apologize for manipulating Percy. It doesn't feel right. But then again, nothing about this movie feels right. And I guess that now brings us to the main reason I wanted to make this video. The big reason I wanted to talk about it. But before we do, disclaimer. I realize that the next section of this video is going to be a big jump in subject matter, especially for one that's making fun of a bad Thomas movie. But please bear with me because I think it's important. So, with that being said, let's talk about racism. I'm about to say something very controversial. Discrimination, bad. Inequality, bad. And bigotry, bad. Now I'll admit, I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm a white cis man with a major about digital arts and inclusive culture. There are definitely more qualified people out there who know more than I do. But with that being said, I wouldn't say I'm completely unqualified. I took an honors college class where we spent a whole semester writing a paper about race, gender, or class inequality, and I learned a lot from it. And I want to pass some of that knowledge on to you guys, as not only is it important to the discussion of Day of the Diesels, but it is also important in general. So with that being said, let's discuss some history. We'll start with colonialism. Colonialism is basically taking control of foreign land and exploiting those who live there. Colonialism is key to a proper historical examination of the Western world. The United States of America was founded by white men for white men. Don't believe me? Then why did we need to make all those amendments to the Constitution? We forcefully took the land from the Native Americans and exploited the people in Africa to use as slaves. It took a whole civil war to abolish slavery, and while it was partially a moral debate, it was mostly an economic one. Anyone who wasn't white was dehumanized and hated because of the color of their skin. Whiteness was a big part of the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Some Asians appealed to courts saying that they were white, segregation and Jim Crow laws were aplenty. Through social justice movements, we've made steps forward, but it only helps so much. Direct racism is still out there, but it's mostly indirect and systemic racism now. Stuff like redlining, the war on drugs, and the constant criminalization of black families and police brutality. There's a reason why the Black Lives Matter movement exists. There's a reason why people don't like anti-woke culture. Racism is still alive in our culture, and it is even enabled by having certain people in power. Okay, that was a lot. So what does this have to do with Day of the Diesels? Well, actually, it's quite simple, really, because the Diesels are the black people of this movie. Okay, hear me out on this. The politics of Thomas and Friends can honestly be a completely different video, but for the sake of this video, we're mainly going to look at how diesels and steam engines are portrayed in the nitrogen era. In this era, the steam engines are openly racist towards diesels. We see this in Day of the Diesels, obviously, but also throughout other parts of the nitrogen era, like Misty Island Rescue and Season 14.
No, Diesel! I'm sure Sir Topham Hatt means a really useful steamy. You'll never be that.
Wow, Thomas, how racist of you.
I have never clapped and cheered.
That's because you are a diesel.
Wow, James, how also racist of you. But what makes Day of the Diesels different is that there are more direct parallels than ever. We get blatant racism like before, but we also see where the diesels lived. It's far from the steamies and a very poor living condition, sort of like the communities that are formed by redlining. We see the diesels are ignored by authority, mainly Sir Topham Hatt, which has heartbreaking parallels to real life. There's a lot of other parallels I could draw, but here's the interesting part. This is pretty different from how the original books and the model series handled it, where the steam engines seemed to be the ones oppressed and the diesels were the antagonists. There were some nice diesels, but they were usually the villains, especially in the latter half of the model era. It was like that because diesels replaced steam engines in real life. I think the intention with this change was to flip the usual dynamic on its head and make the diesels more sympathetic. It's definitely interesting, and it could have been great if it was given the time and nuance that it deserved. But the problem is that the diesels are still the bad guys of the show, and now that the nitrogen era and this movie are trying to make diesels the non-whites of this universe, I think you might see where I'm going with this, but through the writing vessel that is the diesels in Thomas and Friends, are the nitrogen era writers saying that non-white people who stand up to authority and want equal treatment are the bad people? Like, that sounds crazy, but it's what it looks like to me. Like, why would you make the diesels sympathetic when they still need to be the bad guys of the show? Am I looking too far into this? Probably. I mean, this was the nitrogen era. The quality of the writing was at an all-time low, and I wouldn't be surprised if this, problematic parallel to real life was completely unintentional. But this now brings us to one final point and a question that I feel inclined to ask. Were the diesels in the wrong? So the diesels have been hated for being diesels by the steam engines and have been living in a poorly kept up diesel works simply because Sir Topham Hatt has forgotten about them. Diesel 10's frustrations are very justified in my opinion, and thus I don't think the diesels were in the wrong for taking over the steamworks. Or at least that was until Diesel 10 heel turned and decided they won't give the steamworks back before Sir Topham Hatt even showed up. And apparently this was the plan all along, and he was never friends with Percy. They were using Percy to tell Sir Topham Hatt about the diesel works, and when that didn't work, the diesels used him again to take over the steamworks. That's pretty messed up of them to do. I would say that the diesels are definitely in the wrong. So that answers the question. While you could justify the diesels' reasoning, their way of completing it was very wrong. End of conversation, right? Well, the thing is, I can't help but feel that going this direction was the wrong way to do it. And especially considering everything else we just talked about. I mean, the Diesels shouldn't have been the obvious villains, right? Especially with how sympathetic they are and how much their story parallels real life. You see, at the end of the movie, Percy and Thomas tell Sir Topham Hatt about why the Diesels did this and that they should get a new Diesel Works. It's a moment where Percy acknowledges the good in the Diesels. It's a good scene, but I don't know, while it works, it doesn't feel quite right. The Diesels are still the bad guys, and I think you needed to show more of their complexity to make a scene like this work. Like, maybe have some of the nicer Diesels disagree with Diesel 10's plan. That could have been interesting. And honestly, it probably would have been better to have a Diesel deliver the speech instead of Percy. And again, it's Sir Topham Hatt's fault for not giving the Diesels a new Diesel Works sooner, and seemingly ignoring them. He can't just turn around and say every engine is special. It comes off as disingenuous. And you can't just end the movie with Thomas and Percy just being best friends again without acknowledging how bad Thomas was at being a friend while also ignoring the Diesels entirely. But I guess that's how it is. The Diesels have to be the villains. Sir Topham Hatt can't be in the wrong. Thomas can't be anything more than Percy's perfect friend. And the ending has to be about Percy and Thomas, not Percy and Diesel 10. That kind of says it all right there, doesn't it? This is what I mean when I say Day of the Diesels feels wrong. It feels like there was supposed to be a story that was meant to have more depth and flaws with some of our favorite characters, but then it was changed at the last minute. Was it cowardice from the studio or maybe the writers? I'm not saying that this was the case, and it probably wasn't. I mean, yeah, Day of the Diesels did have some changes before its final release, though it seemed like it had to do with the fire scenes and cutting old characters, and less so with the actual writing of the film. But whatever the true story is, the end result is still a movie that feels wrong and problematic, and it's just so disappointing. Day of the Diesels could have been good with just a few changes. But I guess it just wasn't meant to be. It's kind of ironic. The movie that could not and did not disappoint me as a kid disappoints me now. Kind of poetic, isn't it? So, in conclusion, I don't like Day of the Diesels. There were some good ideas, and I wouldn't say it's my least favorite Thomas movie, but it's also kind of down there, and they really needed more work to be done on this one. One thing's for sure though, it's certainly a uniquely bad Thomas movie. It's funny, I never expected to make this video, but I'm glad I did. It was fun and informative. Maybe I need to talk about the other Thomas movies. I've been thinking of doing a my opinion on every Thomas movie video, so maybe I'll make that soon. Let me know if you want to see that, or let me know if you want to see more videos in this style. But with that being said, I think that's finally it, folks. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and best wishes until we meet again.